Hello and welcome to Teaching My Cat to Read, the very serious book review podcast. I'm Lotti, and this week we're discussing everything about Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere with friends of the podcast, Liv and AJ. Woo! Which I always say now, by the way, guys. I just always say at the start of the podcast. But yes, welcome, friends to the podcast, Liv and AJ. Welcome back. How are you both since our Wheel of Time recordings?
Good to be back.
It's good to be back. Thank you for having us. Sounds very much like BBC News. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us. Yeah.
And now back to you in the studio.
For those who don't know, Liv and AJ, friends of the podcast, fellow Wheel of Time nerds, fellow Brandon Sanderson nerds. We recorded some bonus episodes all about Wheel of Time stuff, and we wanted to do some more. And so the other thing that we have in common is a love of Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere universe, books, everything.
Not very surprising.
Yes, this is what this whole episode is all about. We are prefacing this with an FYI. We have all read all of the books. This is not a spoiler-free episode. We will try and flag it, but in particular, as far as I'm aware on our little document, the main books we're probably going to discuss are the Stormlight Archive, all 4 of them, Mistborn, and I think the main potential spoiler for that would be for book 3, maybe also book 2. And then also a discussion about Easter eggs. So probably maybe if you've listened to the episodes that we've done on Warbreaker and the Final Empire, I talked about this character called Hoid who pops up all over in the Cosmere. And so we're going to prefacing an episode with that. So if you do not want to be spoiled for anything, you've been warned. Everything's fair game. Okay, guys, Cosmere. I guess one of the key things about the Cosmere and Brandon Sanderson's work is the magic systems and how they work over the different books. So I guess my first question to you would be, what is your favourite magic system and why?
So my one I think is a little controversial. My favourite is in Warbreaker with the use of dress. Partly because it does seem quite simple to me, as in you can sort of give life to something and animate it according to your one breath that you are born with, and you can gain more and you can give them away. And I think the main reason I love it, though, is unlike pretty much every other magic system, it's not genetic and it's not random chance. It's everyone is sort of starts on the same page. And so everyone has the capacity for it, which then ends up like capitalism, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I like that it's not, genetic like so many are. So yeah, it's also just like all of Sanderson's, it's just a little bit unique and weird.
Yeah. How about you, AJ? Which one's your favourite?
So I think I was really torn because I want to say partly say Mistborn, partly say Stormlight Archive. So I think Stormlight Archive for me is probably pips it a little bit because I just really love the poeticness of it. The fact that you have these characters and through their character journey, their character journey themselves in and of itself kind of gives them more power, and how you have the kind of the words they say sort of grants them the next level of power, but also kind of another level of understanding, and how each kind of order of Stormlight, you have the different words they say, but also it kind of had different meanings to them. So the one I particularly liked, I think Kaladin's Way of Kings is one of my favourite books, but Kaladin's kind of first sort of saying of the words was kind of part of his character journey. And then Dalinar's saying of his words in Oathbringer, my God, that was just such a beautiful character moment and this arc and this journey. And he comes and says, I will bind everyone, and it's just it's brilliant. But then I have to still have a little mention for Mistborn because it has a very special place in my heart, because it was one of those books. I read it after The Way of Kings because I read Cosmere backwards, and I really enjoyed the scientificness of it, and it's something I've really enjoyed doing sort of when I've done my own writing. It's sort of a very scientific way of constructing a magic system. You have the sort of the different metals, you drink a different metal, you have a different power, different people can drink different metals and have a different power, but also like the way it influences the world is very, and they have this with Stormlight as well, but it was the very sort of like physics way it influences the world. I really like that. It's a lot of fun just to see how you kind of like do this kind of very physics analysis of magic systems, because all the fantasy I've read before that was very high fantasy, like Shannara, which is sort of very like they have magic, there might be some constraints around it, but it's very kind of there's a spell, there's like, and it's that fantasy has there is that place for those kind of magic systems in fantasy. I just really enjoyed the scientific structure of it.
And just to add on, in Era 2, you get to see how this magic system that was designed for like medieval things, you know, swords and spears, suddenly is used to help with guns.
Yeah.
Oh my god, steampunk fantasy.
So
I'm sorry, but that is like the best. It's just so, and like you say, it's just like, and now we're going to take sorcery fantasy and we're going to give them all guns, and then we're going to give it like steampunk vibes. We're now shooting each other with bullets.
And how the technology, like what tech is present because the magic system is there, and what tech isn't present because of the magic system.
I really love Era 2 for that, and I think that's the thing I love about Mistborn as a series, is because how he's going with it is the first era, quote unquote, the original trilogy is your quote classic fantasy. It's subverting tropes of like imperialism, especially in the first book, and then the second and third book go on to discuss different political structures and how that is good or bad. And then there's the second era, which is kind of like the era he didn't mean to, but sort of he wrote a book while in between Wheel of Time and then wrote a whole trilogy of them.
He wrote it on the plane, I think. He was like on a plane flight, and then he was like, I'm just going to write a story. And it's like, I'll go to novella.
It's going to be about
it's 3 novellas. Now it's like 3 novellas and 3 novellas.
And it's just like accidentally wrote a book. But it's so, like, I love the steampunk. And then there's Era 3 and Era 4. And Era 4, which is going to sort of, is the closing series for the whole of the Cosmere, is going to be science fiction. So you've got science fiction plus magic. It's 21st century, which I'm very, very excited for.
So one thing I really like about I can't remember where he said it, but like Brand said he had he really was interested in sort of understanding what the point was where fantasy becomes science fiction or science fiction becomes fantasy. And it's something that you can see a lot in his magic systems as well, like in the second era of Mistborn and Stormlight 4, where you start getting the technology developed off the magic system, and they're making like ships that can fly and like things like that, but using the magic system. And it's just a really, as a writer myself, I really find that as an interesting concept. Like you're kind of sort of looking at 2 genres that are very similar, but then you're kind of like putting them into one another and going, actually, what is the difference between these 2? How can I make a fantasy book a sci-fi book, and how can I make a sci-fi book a fantasy book? And I just love that. I just really, really like that kind of thinking and deconstruction of genres.
What do you guys think about? Because I think one of the interesting things in the Cosmere is you have investiture, which is, I guess, I think magic is like invested. You have the 3 different realms, the physical realm, the cognitive realm, and the spiritual realm. And then you also have the interaction of the magic systems on the people with the layering of those 3 realms due to the different shards. And just obviously note, if you don't know what a shard is and you haven't read further than a couple of books, then that is perfectly okay. I think one of the things I loved about Mistborn is it doesn't introduce, they are technically shard worlds, there are shards on there, and I'll leave it at that. So I don't like just massively spoil stuff.
Well, one thing I just have to say is just the way he's constructed his Cosmere is very interesting, because he's kind of done it in a way that allows you to read the books as a standalone, and then you get the Easter eggs, apart from I think maybe we've got it on our list for later, haven't we? Like what our favourite Easter eggs are, but like I think Stormlight now is kind of pulling it all in, and I will admit there are points where I have to go and like look it up on the internet.
Yeah.
Who is what and what is who, because I just can't keep track anymore.
I was listening to one of Sanderson's interviews, and he was saying originally it wasn't going to be quite so interconnected. It was just going to be small Easter eggs. But the fact that you have got internet wikis and people can look up who these characters are means he's doing a lot more.
Yeah.
Which is, it's great because I know I've got friends who are only reading the Stormlight Archives, and it makes perfect sense to them. They're not picking up on all of the little things, but at the same time, it's a series that works.
Yeah.
And I think he's just been very clever because he's got a certain amount of consistency in the magic, as in it comes from a shard. There are the 3 realms.
Yeah.
But at the same time, each shard has got its own identity, which means each magic system is different. Mm-hmm. And I still love how there are always questions of, well, what happens if you try to use the Mistborn magic system on the Stormlight Archives planet?
Yeah.
Or vice versa. What would happen?
And it's all those like little hints of the magic. And I think the point about the books, you don't have to read them all to enjoy them. I definitely think that's true about Era 2, the first book. I read it and I was like, this is a fun heist plus magic. To be honest, you don't have to have read all of the original trilogy to enjoy that book, in my opinion. And likewise with the Stormlight Archive, Hoid is the one who tends to do magic systems that maybe shouldn't be there, TM. And like he made a little straw doll for the kid, and then the straw doll walked off, and you're like, oh, that's Warbreaker magic. And then he like flips a coin, you're like, hang on a minute, that's the other one.
Oh my god, I never realised that. How did I know
and
that?
then he's like, and then the colours one he does in Warbreaker, when he talks to Siri and he's doing the colours and he's playing the flute, it's the one from his home planet, and it's the same one he uses with Kaladin when he's talking to Kaladin about like the story of the girl.
Oh my god,
so
I
it's
never
like
realised that.
It's kind of those sort of subtle Easter eggs which when you reread it and you read them all, you're like, oh, a thing is there.
Can I just have a little like segue into my favourite Easter egg of all time,
Spoilers.
which was Nightblood's reveal.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, go. Just spoiler alert. Can we say spoiler alert?
And then
spoiler alert. No, I've not said. I've just said the reveal.
Yeah.
In spoiler in the Stormlight Archive. I literally threw the book across the room when I read that. I was like, oh my actual god.
What I love about that one is I can remember reading like Words of Radiance as it came out, and there was already a pretty strong theory that Zahil was Vasher based on certain words that were being used and, metaphors.
Yeah.
And up till this point, Sanderson had been so subtle with his world hoppers. I was Googling for them.
Yeah.
I was looking at theories. It was, they're deep. And then along comes an epilogue, and with the subtlety of a brick thrown in your face.
And it's literally he's just chucked the sword, is just chucked on the floor, and it's got some smoke. You're like, oh, is it? Oh, is it? Oh, is it? And then he's like, starts speaking.
And it's like, and also that's the final line of that chapter is like, hello, would you like to kill some evil? And it doesn't say what the sword is, and it just, so if you don't know, you're like, oh, it's a talking sword, grand. But like all the subtle ones, if we're talking about Easter eggs, the 5 people in the interlude in the first book who go to the little lake where they're on the lake.
Oh, that one, yeah.
They, like, one of them's from the Elantris world, and I'm pretty sure one of them is, it's not...
One of them's from Mistborn.
One of them's from Mistborn,
is it Doxon or Britain? It's not...
No, it's Demut.
It's Demut, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's also, I can remember there was one interlude in one of the Stormlight Archive books where the guy does not refer to a bird as a chicken.
Yeah.
Which, like, segue again, this is one of my favourite bits of world building. The Stormlight Archive is not conveniently Earth-like. It does not have a lot of Earth-like animals.
Yeah.
Birds are not known there apart from chickens, so whenever a bird is seen, anyone native to the world will call it a chicken. So, which leads to...
The fact that the parrot's not a chicken, is it? It's like, it's a colourful chicken. And it's just like...
sitting on his shoulder.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's like, it's the chicken. And then
Yeah.
you have an interlude, and at one point someone was just like, oh, the raven's over there. And it's like, this guy is not native to this world.
I never picked that up, you know. I think I kind of... I don't do the subtle ones until I read the wikis, and then I'm like, oh my God, how did I miss this? Because I don't read the details. But one I really liked, and this is a spoiler alert, in Rhythm of War, it's right at the end. I can't remember the details of it, but I definitely remember Ciri meets a Sion.
That's like Shallan.
Shallan. Oh God.
Yeah.
Shallan. Yeah. Also, the other person with the other S, but she meets a Sion and she like opens the little box and the little Sion like blobs out. I really enjoyed that because that was just like you could see he's pulling all the threads together. And can we just have like another little segue into just the Rhythm of War's like going so hardcore with the science of Stormlight?
I mean, as a resident STEM nerd, like I was so happy when Navini like basically just does a massive science experiment, and I was going, oh my God, she has notebooks and she's writing down all her experiments and what happens. And then what also made me happy was the fact that they're harmonics, because it's sound and vibrations have harmonics, and then the fact that the light vibrations and the whole thing matches up. And then they were talking about how, what was it, the iron... There was something mentioned about the different metals used
in the fabricators, and you're like, oh no, that's Mistborn.
That's Mistborn. Hello, and then also like aluminium when we orange-haired lady who that was also fun like tidbit. Orange-haired lady they go down and they find how they're like soul casting all this food without the bad guys sort of knowing, and it's because they've lined it with aluminium. And again, Mistborn.
I never spotted that either.
Yeah,
I need to reread these books. That's what I have to say. One of my favourite things about the Cosmere is you can reread it lots of times and still enjoy it just as much when you first read it, because you're either picking up on stuff you didn't recognise before, or you can... I just really like the fact that it's kind of got a longevity in that read. Like it's not just like you read it once and then you never read it again. You can come back to it and find something new about it when you read it again.
And like the foreshadowing is good enough that there can be a reveal in book 4 that when you read book 1 suddenly things make a lot more sense. So I can remember in book 1 someone had just said something along the lines of, well, Shallan's got a shard blade, hasn't she? Because the way she was talking about waiting 10 heartbeats for something. And, you know, everyone throws up their hands in the air and goes like, oh my God, what? Then, okay, this is going to be heavy spoilers for Rhythm of War, but in
spoiler.
book 2, you're like, oh no, of course she's got a shard blade, she's a radium. And it's only when you get to Rhythm of War and they're like, oh no, hang on a minute. She only got her shard blade with the second oath she did. So the one she had in the first book must have belonged to a dead Spren that she had previously. Yeah. And it's like, when you read Way of Kings, the first book again, you're like, how is it this obvious? And I
didn't pick up on that. I did not pick up on that. Like, I think...
I didn't pick up on the two Sprens either.
No,
spoiler, but...
Yeah. I did not pick up on that, like, at all until it was basically in front of me, and I was going, oh my God, yeah, like that is it. It's so true, and all those little hints are dropped through. They're like peppered through. In some cases, I feel like with finding out what happened to Shallan's brother is sort of you. I think the reader in some cases, like I definitely picked up on what had happened before it got to that point in the book. And then there are other twists, like what happened to Kaladin, or for example, Harmony in Mistborn, that you're like, I'm sorry, what? Yeah. The just happened?
I have to say, one of the moments in Rhythm of War was then, I'm going to get his name wrong, but Taravingian gets the shard, and I'm like,
I did not see.
I'm sorry, this is not how the story is supposed to play out.
Sanderson killed off the big bad and replaced them 4 books in.
With a bigger bad.
I know. I was like... And you're like, I just didn't know what to think. I was like,
yeah.
Huh.
I think that's what I love about the books is firstly, and I mentioned this I think on the Warbreaker episode we did, that one of the things I love about Brandon Sanderson's writing is you know what you're getting yourself in for. Now, having read more books for the podcast other than just Brandon Sanderson and Wheel of Time and Perpetual Loop, stuff like, say, that is much more, like, I say flowery language, but more descriptive, like Wuthering Heights, for example. It's really depressing, but very descriptive. Or, like, when I read Frankenstein for the first time, and I'm going, God, this is so just archaic language. It feels like you're doing a creative writing class at school, and then you've thrown in all the clever long words, because you want to make it look clever to the teacher, and like that is not Brandon Sanderson's way of writing.
Like he focuses on worlds, yeah. Like, and I think he's like, I always liked him for his world building and magic. And again, it's one thing that always got me about Stormlight Archive was, as I said, it's not conveniently Earth-like. It's got a magic system which works with it. And then when spoilers, book 3 comes along and goes, well, yes, humans were originally off-world and they were Voidbringers. And it's like, this should have been very obvious because I've been reading 2 whole books at this point about how it's not, humans are obviously different from all of the animals, but it's the focus an author needs to write a world like that.
Just on that point, I really liked how he kind of turned the reader's expectations on their head with that, because when you read a fantasy book, you kind of go, right, I'm going to get fantasy world. And everyone goes, oh, he's done a very good fantasy world with like the bugs and the, whatever. Bugs, insects, but it's like very insect-based, crabs and very sort of like that kind of world. Yeah. And then he kind of brings out, like you say, the humans are from off-world. And it's almost like turning, sort of playing with that concept in fantasy books where it's like, it's a magical world and there's some humans in it. And he's kind of gone, there's a magical world and there's humans in it because they don't belong there. Rather than it being like, it's just, I just found that as a really clever way of sort of questioning a fantasy trope.
And also just it's just amazing the detail that goes into like creating a world this obvious. I think it's the gravity is less, and it shows then in terms of how people can jump across chasms and how you can have the sort of the eels that somehow, like the sky eels that can sort of fly. And it's all the little bits of details in the world which are always consistent. Like, there's the effects of not having grass everywhere means that you have very few animals that eat it. All of the flora can survive hurricane level winds, and you never really find a mistake in the world building and if something doesn't fit in, it's intentional, which is like not every fantasy author has that with their world. And that also applies to the magic systems, I think, of how this magic system works. If you're given half of the rules, you can start to work out what the other half should be, because Sanderson is very strict on how his magic systems work.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of nice in terms of like, what you're getting yourself in for, because I definitely I'm just useless at picking things up on my first read. And so it gives me enjoyment when I reread them that, oh, there's a thing I didn't pick up, or there's another thing I didn't pick up. And at the same time, I don't feel like it's detracting from the story if I don't pick up on those things, going back to a point of like not picking up on Easter eggs. I definitely don't think that. On which note, which book of the whole Cosmere do you like the least, and why?
I have a feeling we're all going to give the same answer to this.
Yeah, I think we are.
I feel like it's an unfair answer though, because my least favorite is Elantris, yeah. But I think it's also his first book, and one thing I kind of really enjoy when I read it is when you read that book and then you read like Way of Kings or something. Firstly, like how much his writing has developed. Like it's really nice to sort of see that an author in their career has changed how they write as they've learned more, as they've practiced more, and kind of gives us all like budding novelists like hope that we'll get better. But it's also like, I remember there was something he said where he wrote Way of Kings before he wrote anything else. Like the Way of Kings Prime, I think it's available on his website for free. And then he was like, actually, I don't have the skills to do this story justice, so I'm going to park it and I'm going to go and write a bunch of stories that teach myself the skills to get me published, and then I'm going to go back to that story. And I just found that was a really interesting way, and quite like a sort of quite clinical way of looking, because when you're writing, you kind of look at it like, oh, I'm going to be a writer, I'm going to write books, here's my story, here's my grand plan. And it was just a really kind of clinical way of going, you know what, I don't have the skills to write that particular story yet, so I'm going to go and write some other ones which are in my skill set right now, so I can learn and try and test for the later ones. So I feel like that's just got to be my little caveat to say, Elantris is my least favourite. It's the one I say that because it's the one I'm least likely to try and reread.
Yeah,
but
I agree.
The only thing I do have to say is I do like the lady in it, whose name has gone straight out my head. She's a lot of fun.
I have to say, I got quite lucky, I think, because I read Sanderson's work mostly in order. So Elantris was one of the first ones I read. So sort of it got better. And I think it's partly just things like the magic wasn't quite as unique as all the others. It is sort of just writing runes in air, which has been done before or similar. So again, it's got a lot of stuff I do like in it. And in fact, one of the characters, it was, again, after I finished it, the character I liked the most was the villain, like Hrathen, because he's actually pretty damn sympathetic, and I quite liked him. And I think one of my favourite reveals is the, for their religion, that it's quite a martial one, and all the priests wear, like, decorative armour. And with, like, 99% of the priests, it's fake, because real armour is heavy. And then you get to, the climax of the book, and someone tries to stab this guy and realises that the huge armour that Hrathen has been wearing the entire book is in fact real. Which is just a tiny detail, and I loved it. And it said a lot about that character. And I just love authors who can do good villains, so, yeah.
Yeah. I think with Elantris, I think the thing that I'm least likely to reread it. I do want to reread it because I think maybe I'll be a bit more sympathetic on a reread. Like when I read Mistborn for the first time, which I think I started with Mistborn, definitely. I think I read all three of them before I started with any others. Then I did Elantris and then maybe Way of Kings. But with Elantris, I think the thing that I remember from that the most is not the Scions. I couldn't understand how they work. That really confused me. Was actually the perpendicularities, because I think that's the first book where they're explicitly mentioned of having words, having perpendicularities where you've got a big pool of water and it's close to or you've got stronger magic there, and so you're closer to a god. And then in, say, Well of Ascension, it's a well with some stuff in it. Oh, let's have a thinky poo. Oh, that's one. That comes up in The Secret History. And then Stormlight. In Way of... Yeah, and in Stormlight as well, with where Rock's family is from in the mountains, that has...
a large pool of water.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're like, ooh, what's that?
And it is the case of, because Elantris was written so early, it's only after you read the others you actually know what it is then. Because in Elantris it's just a big magical pool of weird water, which you know is some connection to some higher being, but you don't know what a shard is at this point. You don't really know what's going on. And it's as you say, it's when you read the others and it's like everything is connected.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the thing I like the most about Mistborn. And to be honest, it's why when we started on the podcast and we were like, and I was tossing up between getting the guys to read The Emperor's Soul or Mistborn. I think Mistborn is great because you don't need to understand shards. You don't need to understand what a shard world is. You don't need to understand the physical, cognitive and spiritual realms, which come more into play in the Stormlight Archive and also to a degree in Warbreaker, I think a little bit.
And also, Final Empire is one of my two favourite Cosmere books, partly because it's a heist book, which are always fun. You're following a group of thieves trying to take down an immortal god. And it's like, any book where that's the plot, I will love. It's got one of my favourite characters in it, who is this very clever, charismatic, and slightly psychopathic con man, as well as a very good point of view character. And it is just, on its own, a fun heist book. Books 2 and 3 bring in a more kind of epic fantasy feel, but you can almost read one as just a complete standalone, almost low fantasy, fun little jaunt.
Yeah, it's a fun heist book, and I think that's why I love it. And I think with Emperor's Soul, it definitely is a brilliant starting point. As it's a short story, it's easier to get into if people are a bit, or I say people, friends you're trying to prod to go and read Cosmere, please, TM. It's a bit more persuadable because it's a novella. But I think it is probably perfection in the way that he introduces all the 3 realms, shard worlds, magic system, the whole thing in one tiny little novella, and it's just executed incredibly well. And the pacing of it is very good. And
it was written a bit later, so the writing has improved.
Yes, I definitely think you can tell that with the Emperor's Soul. I guess we kind of have mentioned crossovers, and so I'm just going to be spoilers. I might make a jingle for spoilers or something at some
Spoiler
point. Spoiler jingle. I'll make something at some point. But yeah, crossovers / twists of books. So I think for me, Kaladin. What happens to Kaladin in We're Kings and how he has ended up where he is was beautiful.
Made me cry.
Yeah, it made me cry. I was just so... I love We're Kings so much. It's such a good book. And then also the fact that the trainer is Warbreaker guy whose name I can't pronounce. And... yeah, you're meant to pick up on that, like you said earlier, from the colours. He does lots of colours, idioms, and therefore you think, ooh, which magic system has colours in it? Ooh, that's Nathless. Ooh, it's Warbreaker guy. I did not pick up on that until we met Nightblood. And also Hoid. I guess, what other Easter egg? What's your favourite Easter egg?
I mean, I've mentioned a lot of them already, and I do like the big ones. I love the ongoing thing that Kelsier and Hoid hate each other. And I think related to that, my favourite was the one that made me almost shout in rage, which is the reveal of who the leader of the Ghostbloods is.
Yeah. See, where is this? Because I missed this information when I read it.
So this is, again, massive spoilers, but it was always a pet theory of mine that Vidakar was Kelsier, because I was trying to work out what Kelsier would get up to and thought he'd just start a massive mafia, wouldn't he? And then in Rhythm of War, they started dropping hints. And to be fair, the best hint is the fact that Hoid has beaten up the leader of the Ghostbloods. And so far, there is only one singular person this can apply to.
Because when did he beat him up? Was that
Secret History?
Mistborn. Oh, yes, in Secret History, yes.
Oh, so that's the one I haven't read. That would be why. I was like, where?
You haven't read Secret History?
No.
Oh my god.
Oh dear.
No, I already knew about it because I got... I read it on the Coppermine, so I was kind of I already knew about it. I kind of knew what was going on. I've just never read it.
And you've read Bands of Mourning, which is the...
Yeah, I've read that one.
Yeah, which is... Secret History is mostly just what Kelsier was doing in the background of books 2 and 3.
Mistborn. Yeah,
you get, because Hoid's got this weird thing where he can't do harm to anyone. It comes up that there was a very specific situation where this doesn't apply, and so gets into a fistfight with Kelsier, which is one of the many reasons to read Secret History, to be honest.
Well, this is clearly the next book on my list.
It's the number of people punching people in that book is brilliant.
Sold. There you go. That's it. That's the sales pitch right there.
But that just made me very both angry, upset, and also proud, because it's totally in character, but it's also one of my favourite characters became a villain. I was like, oh no.
Yeah. I did not twig that it was Kelsier until I was reading the wiki about like 3 hours ago in preparation for this episode. So yeah, it turns out you can't pick up everything, which is why the wiki's great, because then you can like read it and go back and go, hang on a minute.
I still don't know who the bad guys are in Era 2. Every so often I read the wiki to remind myself of them, but I keep forgetting what they're doing.
I can't keep up. I mean, this is why, like, I think going back to the point of like you can read into it however much you want to, because like, yeah, I'm just thinking of like the secret history. The secret history is part of the Arcanum Unbounded, and that has like the chicken world in it and where the chickens come from. And I was like, oh, it's the guy with the chicken. There's a whole short story about like a guy who has the chickens and where they get the chickens from.
This would explain a lot, because I was just thinking, like, have I just like missed something really obvious in these books? Like, maybe I need to go reread like Rhythm of War or something.
But I'll give you the books so you can read them. I thought you read them all, but clearly not. I will give you Secret History and I'll give you the whole of them so you can read them all.
What I love most about Secret History is the reason you heard about it first of all was after one of the books, Bands of Mourning, I think, ended. You get a little note at the back going, by the way, I've also written a novella called Secret History. And like,
yeah,
it's called that because no like advertising for it happened. It was just a secret book that got put in as an explanation for some background stuff that was going on.
Yeah. And I think that's like another thing that his Kickstarter that he's just done of like 5, and he just got bored during lockdown and wrote 5 novels. And that's such a Sanderson thing to do. Just like write 5 novels for the lols.
He just kept bringing them out from under the table, and I was like...
that was the best bit, the dramatic bit, and then also like, I won't spoiler what the reveal was because he asked you not to in the YouTube video, but like the most recent YouTube video where he's like looking into the distance like, how will I ever get over this? Blah, blah, blah. And he just has like 3-minute video, and then at the end it's just like, and anyway, spoiler.
And anyway.
It just made me laugh because he's clearly like having so much fun with trolling people. And I was watching his like the YouTube live, and he was like, had like a bunch of D&D dice as his rings because he was like, somebody had sort of said, oh, he's like the... like he's gonna have so much money, like he's not gonna know what to do with it. So anyway, he dressed up in like a bunch of joke like D&D rings, and like a little cape, but he's just like, haha, look at me with my rings, I am there.
Yeah.
And, like in a kind of like self kind of deprecating way. I thought that was hilarious.
And it's like, this is what I love. It's like, I trust the author. Like there's a bunch of, and it's like, it's so good when you like the author who's writing books that you like, and as he's growing, you know, he takes on like criticism and he listens to people. And, you know, Stormlight Archive has a bunch of queer main characters and, you know, has like has actual like good points on mental health and things. And other authors are a bit like worried sometimes if they were attempting to do that. But yeah, it's just like, I find, you know, Stormlight Archive really inspiring at times. And I just like how Sanderson is just a nice guy who is like, has his books kind of show that as well.
Yeah. You can kind of get behind. It's not problematic like the Boy Wizard trilogy, and I'm going to continue with that line because I made the mistake in like series 1, and I'm going to continue it forevermore. Like he's not a problematic person. He's a good bean, and it just, I don't know. It. I
think it's also like you get a lot of sort of. Talking your point about like you trust the author, like there's a lot of fantasy series out there which are quite well known for not getting finished, and I think it's quite, especially as a reader, when you spend like a lot of money on a book series, when you're reading like repeat series, especially a fantasy series where they can get very long, like having that trust in the author, knowing that every 2 years you're going to get a new Stormlight book, or like whatever series you're listening to, and he's got like a really great rapport with his fans. Like he'll give like the Sanderson update of like what he's doing and why things might take longer or shorter, and it's like a really, it's just a really kind of like lovely way to treat your fans. I think what I also really like is he sort of seems to acknowledge that sort of writing books is just as much about the fans in sort of engaging with that book as it is him writing it. So he kind of appreciates the fact that there's this kind of like middle ground. Like he'll write the words on the book. Stephen King has a great thing about this in his advice book series on writing, and he kind of describes it like there's this point when you as a writer might describe like a red table, for example. He uses it to explain like what language you use, and you might say like a red tablecloth, I think he says, and your reader might imagine a different coloured red tablecloth to what you write what you're imagining when you write red tablecloth. And it was just kind of to point out the fact that when your reader is reading a book, they're kind of bringing their own self to that reading, that understanding. And it's just as much about that story that they're reading and engaging with is just as much about them as it is you as a writer. And I just think he sort of really understands that connection and that respect that, you know, the fans really enjoy his work and really engage with his work, and also quite like spend ages like finding all the Easter eggs. So he's like, right, I'm going to put more Easter eggs to like keep you entertained. And whereas like some other authors are kind of have quite a, you know, this is my interpretation of the book, and this is the right way to interpret it, or, you know, the book will take as long as it takes because I am the writer and I will take as long as it takes. And it just sort of, that misses out on that fact that for any story to come alive, you have to have somebody who wants to read it. And if
and at the end of the day, like all of these big books, like especially like Way of Kings and all of those books are 1,000 pages long. Like if you're buying a hardback, it is at least 25-30 quid, and that's a lot of money that the people are spending on your book. They've got to be a buy-in from them to be willing to spend 30 quid on a book, especially in the day and age of, you know, ebooks, where it's, you know, cheaper in a non physical version.
I like a good ebook though. I have been converted to ebooks recently.
Oh, so. Yeah, no, I'm not saying it's bad, but like what I mean is you've got to. I do love, like, if I'm gonna
for that format, yes, you're gonna get.
Yeah, like if I'm gonna buy something hardbound, I want to know I'm gonna enjoy it. Like I think now if I'm gonna if I'm like on the fence. And I think like buying the book for me is also supporting the author, because it's, yeah, like I'm spending that money on the book. But side note, go use your local libraries, and they normally have ebooks, as I've found out this week. Woohoo! Go support your local library and take their books out and read all the Sanderson. But yeah, I think, what is your least favourite magic system?
So I might be a bit controversial on this, because I actually found Warbreaker the least favourite, but just because it made my head hurt. I think I actually, to be quite honest, I did find this with Rhythm of War as well. There got to a point where the magic system got so complex that I was just like, I have no idea what is going on. And I think it was that first read confusion, and I kind of I like it and I don't like it at the same time, because when you reread it, you understand more, and it kind of gives you that interest on the second read. But at the same time, when you're reading it the first time, you're like, what's going on? I'm so confused.
I had that with Way of Kings, because we got so little of the magic system that I was trying to work out how it worked whilst only having a tenth of it.
Oh, see, I was kind of quite it's always having less. Yeah.
But then, when you read more. So I think my least favourite I've mentioned is, I think, from Elantris, just because all of the other, magic systems were quite unique and worked with that world. Whereas just Elantris, whilst it was specific to the world, it wasn't kind of as weird as some of the other ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree with AJ that I think Way of Kings I say the easiest to pick up on is if you have an understanding of, say, Mistborn. I think, actually, to be honest, Mistborn was probably the easiest. I think my least favourite would be the ones that I found most complicated, which I do agree. The breath system in Warbreaker, on the first read, I did not understand. I just enjoyed a sword who wants to kill evil and Vivienne being awesome, which is a point I still stand by, and I'm pretty sure I said that in the episode when we reviewed it. But on a second read, I understood it a lot more. And then also Elantris, I guess kind of for the same reason, because it didn't stick out in my brain. But at the same time with Stormlight, when it got really heavy, like really hard magic system, science-based magicness, some of it was going over my head. I was going, oh, this is too much. Like, what is, there's void light, and then Stormlight, and then they're like, I know it's like a metaphor for matter and antimatter, but this is too much for my little brain. I
never realised that either.
When I was reading that, I was like in the middle of my physics PhD, where I was looking at light emitted from reactions, and I was almost getting to the point of, oh no, this is work.
Like, I don't want to read this anymore. This is too work. Like,
denied. Yeah, like I think it was when she was doing all of her experiments, because I agree, when I was doing all my experiments, I was going, God, this is a mood. This is just such a mood. She's going, oh, I tried this and it didn't work, and trying lots of different things. But yeah, I think that's maybe why I like that. There's bits of Rhythm of War which I really love reading, sort of out of context. Like, I love finding more about Navini's backstory and her relationship with her husband before the big assassination, which is introduced at the start of Way of Kings, because how it's presented up to that point, it's like this perfect happy marriage, and then you get from her point of view, and the guy's an absolute dickhead.
I love how each prologue in the Stormlight Archive is this damn assassination, and each prologue gives more information. And it's like, so many people were there.
It's just like, would you like a little bit more drip feeding? There you go. Have a little tidbit.
But it's like, it really plays with the idea of like deep peer view, point of view, like writing. Like, really, every character has their own view of it. And it's just, I really like how he's played with that. It's really, really clever.
Like, you need to have good characters for that to work. And
definitely, yeah. And a very strong like voice for each character. So when you're reading it, you know this character is different to the last character.
So, noticing the time, I guess, which book do you think the cat would like the most? So the cat rating being, for those who do not know, the cat rating is crime, but it has to be like hijinks crime. There has to be backstabbing of some description and sneaking. And if there is a cat in it, that is a 10 out of 10. So I still think it's
going to be Final Empire, isn't it?
I was going to say, like, when we read Final Empire, I'm like, this is perfect for the cat.
It's like Vin is in it.
Yeah, and she's like cat-like, and then the
she has knives.
The
stabbing
she does
happens.
stabbing.
Crime.
Yeah, and there is crime, and it's like it's hijinks crime. It's not like evil crime, but I say which I think she'd like the world where there's like all the colourful chickens, but mainly I don't know. Maybe she'd chase the chickens.
She probably would chase the chickens.
She probably would chase the chickens.
Or like the world which is half day and half night, because then she could just like lie in the sun all day.
I think I have a little snooze when she wants to.
That is a good point. I was also going to say she'd probably like the in Warbreaker, the palace, like the mood where they're basically all the gods are just sitting around, lounging around, eating grapes all day. Like, I think she'd enjoy that kind of.
That is a mood.
Playing a random game which you don't know the rules for, but you're winning anyway.
Yeah. When you're just like, well, just read it. I love Light Son. He's like my absolute favourite. And who do you think, if she had to like have a favourite human across the Cosmere, who do you think our favourite human would be?
Kelsier, because he gets up to hijinks and doesn't care about anyone else. He is the kind of person who would go up to a vase on the side and knock it off because he could.
He's a cat person. He's going to have a bunch of cats.
Yeah, he'd have a cat person. I think she'd also like Lights On because he'd lounge around. She can lounge around. I don't think Way of Kings Stormlight Archive Roshar is like best suited for her because it's dry. There's like loads of bugs. And it's like,
I know she could chase the bugs.
She could chase the giant bugs. I mean, I think she could take on a giant crab, chasm fiend thing. I think she could take it on.
When you say giant crab, I think of that. What was that Disney film where they've got the dancing crab?
Moana.
Yeah.
With a giant crab.
When you say giant crab, I just think that.
Yeah. That is what is in Stormlight Archive.
Dancing crabs. If you haven't read it, dancing crabs.
Dancing crabs. I mean. But I think that's a fair. I think Stormlight Archive she wouldn't like. The Final Empire I think is best suited. In terms of other books you guys have been reading. They don't have to be Cosmere related. They just have to be book related. It can be tangentially related to books. It can be an adaptation of a book. We're going very thin here because half the time when we ask this question, I haven't actually read another book apart from the one for the podcast. So
I've got a book I really enjoyed.
Okay, tell me about the book.
So I'm going to pronounce this wrong, but it's the Licanius trilogy by James Islington, which is, when I read the Goodreads review of it, everyone was like, if you like Brandon Sanderson, you will like this book. And I was like, yeah, whatever. Anyway, if you like Brandon Sanderson, you'll like this book. It is a really, it's definitely going to be a two read book because I cannot take it all in. I'm trying to read it on an ebook as well, so I can't even use the maps or the glossary, which is proven a lot more difficult than I expected it to be. But it's kind of a little bit like, it starts off a lot like Wheel of Time-esque, sort of like orphaned boy is sent on a quest, and then time travel happens, and it is brilliant. It is like the sort of Sanderson level of plotting, and it's got a very complex, very science-based magic system. So there's kind of a thing called essence and can, and it's a very they make called can machinery. So they make machines out of the magic. And it's just I've never read it before, and I just recommend it. And I came to it very late because all 3 books are out, so it's a finished trilogy as well as a bonus.
That's good.
So yeah, that's the one I would recommend.
I'm being quite pathetic. I'm reading the same book I've been reading for a while because I'm going slowly now. But I am enjoying currently The Grace of Kings by Ken Lewis. It's not what I'd usually read. It's fantasy, but it hasn't really got a strong magic system. So it's very different from Sanderson's or Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time. But it's also, I think, will make a lot more sense when you're about the history of China. But I don't, so I'm learning. But it's set in a fantasy world, and you're following 2 characters, and it's very well written, got excellent turn of phrase, and it's just a little bit different to what I've read previously, but it's such it's an easy read, but it's also a well-written one, and it's got great characters and just a little bit of, just a unique feel to it.
That's pretty cool. I am still, well, I guess I've put Wheel of Time book 10 on hold for a year and a half now, so it's a bit pathetic. I probably just need to restart it. And continuing to listen to Guards by Terry Pratchett, which I am absolutely loving. Yes, love Discworld. It's great. Podcast introduced me to it. I'm still loving it. So yeah, we should probably wrap it up there. But yeah, thank you all so much for listening. Thank you to Liv and AJ for coming on the podcast again. Remember to follow us on your podcast platform if you enjoyed the episode, so you never miss a future episode. And if you enjoyed this episode, please consider giving us a like or review, or sharing it with your friends and family, or attaching it to a carrier pigeon. We don't mind. It's all good promo. But yeah, remember, you can always send us a message via our website or via our social medias, which are probably all linked in the description down below. But yeah, say hello, send us a message, and recommend us some books to read. Big virtual hugs, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.